We're going to dive in. We're going to talk about the latest research on donor psychology, what fundraisers, which in this case is you, should know in 2025. We'll talk about some really interesting studies from all over the world, actually, and we'll talk about some very practical implications of this. Also, Liz's last of four kiddos passed her driver's test today, so very, very exciting. And Meredith in High Point is planning her wedding in September, so congratulations to you. Very exciting. Also, Ken at the University of Central Arkansas says the football season is fast approaching, so many of you have strong rooting interest there. Quick housekeeping notes before we get started. As usual, this event is approved for 1.0 CFRE credits. This is a professional development situation. If you're interested, you can submit any questions in the chat as we go along. We'll answer them at the end of the session. And as usual, recordings and slides will be sent around later today. Some of you will still ask about this. That is okay. We still love you. But if you can help me out when someone asks that, just let them know. And James Taylor, good songs. Okay, great. Intros, research behind what makes donors give, why they give or not give, and then if they give, why they give more or less. We'll talk about some really interesting research around thank yous. We'll talk about some very, very cool ways to do this as well. All right, let us dive in together. Quick intros. My name is Patrick. This is what I look like when I am an acoustic campfire folk singer. Much shorter beard right now. And my dear friend, Jenny Xiao Spradling, who also happens to be the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill. Together, we are the biggest estate planning tool and plan giving solution in the United States, featured in lovely periodicals, and partner with many of you, including our dear friends of the Diabetes Association, the Red Cross, Greenpeace, the Urban League, et cetera, et cetera. And just as a quick shout out to some of the orgs mentioned here, if you were not at last week's session with the American Heart Association, the Red Cross, and Susan G. Komen Foundation, where three of the smartest people in fundraising give all of their thoughts on end of year planning, go back and watch that recording. It is totally worth it. Rebecca, Pam, and Trish did a heck of a job, as many of you who were there can attest. So if you haven't, go watch that as well. That was really excellent. And of course, the FreeWill team is a huge effort. I'm joined today by my colleagues Phoebe and Robert, as well as many other folks who helped put this together. Closing in on $13 billion raised for nonprofits to date, 2,200 nonprofit partners, more than 5 centuries of fundraising experience and counting. And then a couple last things before we get into it. We are so glad that you're here. We're so thrilled. It blows my mind how many folks join every week. In this case, we have, oh boy, 1,213 people on the call right now. One thing we like to say thank you is we're going to send some of my favorite books. This is a book by Steven Pinker, Professor Steven Pinker, to 20 people, How the Mind Works. So if you are interested in other people or yourself or both, make a note in the survey at the end of the call, and we will give a chance to give you a copy. All right, how's your week going? Generally, things are looking pretty positive. A little bit of a downturn since last week, but overall, generally up. This sort of interestingness around eagerness is rock. We have the most eager week in a year. So if anyone has thoughts on why that is, let us know. A couple of people say great session last week. So Zach says it's because Mercury is in retrograde. And then how confident we're feeling our goals. We are back up. We've had a very good few weeks in the equity markets, in the S&P 500, the Dow, and the NASDAQ are all up. Rough end of the week, bounce back start of the week. But overall, and you look at a historical perspective, or even over the last 14, 15 months, things are looking very, very good. What does that mean? It means stock gifts up, DAF gifts up, foundation, right? Foundation grants up because all of those endowments are growing. There's a minimum payout rate. QCDs, which are these gifts out of IRAs, up. Slight uptick in inflation. That means cash gifts down. And some, those of you who saw the free minutes saw that the jobs report wasn't super. What that means is you may have more stress among your sort of very small dollar donors, especially those still of working age. So we can dive into more of that in the questions if anyone wants to. But I want to come to today's session and actually just look at a whole bunch of great academic research, because so often I think you end up in fundraising where it's like best practices are, common wisdom is, and let's actually look at what the academic research tells us about how people's brains work and how it affects charitable giving. So first, we are biologically hardwired to be generous. According to a 2011 NIH study, How We Empathize with Others, a neurobiological perspective, which I'm guessing you did not read, but we read for you, charitable giving activates the brain's reward systems. This is the same part of our brain that's triggered by things like food, or coffee or tea, right? Or chocolate or getting money unexpectedly, it also lights up from generosity, right? So it's important to understand how that works. Research found that even when people are forced to give to others, their brain still shows activity and reward processing areas. Now, why might this be, right? Now, um, these are not sort of biological historians. They're just telling us what the history is. But one can imagine that the tribes, right, these sort of cave tribes and cave families that spent more time looking out for each other had were thriving to a greater degree and were allowed themselves to eventually grow and pass on their genetics more so than the extra selfish cave tribes who were not helpful to each other and eventually died out when things got tough, right? So this is we were evolved into being this way, right? Voluntarily giving a list is an even stronger reaction, right? So we are hardwired by our biological evolution to want to support others and care for folks. There was another study at the University of San Diego by economist James Andreoni, who coined the term the warm glow giving. The warm glow is that sense of joy, that activation in your brain that comes from giving no matter what the outcome is. It's considered a form of impure altruism, where both self-interest and generosity motivate giving. Later studies linked warm glow to empathy and found that it increases when donors feel very emotionally close to the cause or to the person, right? If you look at most major cultures and civilizations across history, there were a lot of celebrations of gift giving. There are some celebrations that are gift giving to the poor, right? The charitable giving in some form. Now, the tax status and the tax regimes vary widely across the world, but some sort of alms giving or charitable giving, um, even when sometimes it is structured legislatively through welfare systems and taking care of other people, shows up sort of across the board and it's likely because that as a species, we're pretty hardwired to this. Insight three, right? As we think about these feelings actually influence decision making in the economic sense. And one study out of Carnegie Mellon University in the great city of Pittsburgh sought to understand the effects of emotions on our economic decisions. Now, this did not explicitly look at giving. It just looked at how do our emotions um, affect the way we do this. Now, participants were split into two groups, sellers and buyers. Sellers were given a highlighter set, so I don't have any on my desk, but this sort of pack of yellow, those fluorescent highlighters, and said, "What would you sell this for?" Buyers were then said, "Hey, tell us what you would buy this for," right? And so you get these huge numbers of people, so we can get good data, but we're buying and selling highlighters on a college campus. Now, before assigning a price, some portion watched a film designed to induce feelings of disgust or sadness or neutral emotions. So what we're doing here is we're testing how do these different emotions or no change in emotions at all affect your economic decisions going forward. Then after we show you the film, we say, great, now go set your price, right? So it's sort of it's treated as separately. Now, what they found is that emotions, as you might imagine, significantly influence our economic decisions. But interestingly, these are not videos about highlighters, right? So it's like, what is your state of mind affecting your decisions, even though the videos have nothing to do with the thing you are buying or selling? So disgust, right? If you had a video that prompted disgust, it lowered both the selling and buying process. Sort of, well, let me get out of this. I don't care. I'm not trying to get any money. I'm not trying to buy highlighters. I just don't want to engage in things. Sadness lowered the assigned selling prices. Well, I'm ready to get rid of it, but it actually raised buying prices. So sadness actually increased people's willingness to um, to spend money, showing that negative emotions can have opposing effects on behavior. In many cases, sadness and deep emotion will increase people's willingness to part with their money. Those of you that might remember the Sarah McLachlan videos of the 90s and early 2000s sort of said this was that strategy, right? Um, I think that was ASPCA, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Now, donors' emotions can affect how much they're willing to give. Just as owning an item increases their perceived value, donors who feel a personal connection or ownership of a cause may give more. Similar to how disgust lower the value of objects in studies, negative emotions might reduce willingness to give or increase willingness to give, depending on the emotion. Positive emotions often increase it as well. Right? So a lot of interesting dynamics here. Now, what makes donors give more? It was ASPCA, and Jacob says he would cry every time. So if you don't some of you are trying to figure out what the heck we're talking about. This was like a quintessential American commercial in a certain period of time that I think is largely off the air, but I could be wrong. And it would just be Sarah McLachlan singing Angel, Adia, someone tell me this. Um, and just like sad animals, and people were still uh it's the arms of an angel. All right. So someone go YouTube this after the call. You'll sort of you'll get what we're talking about. But you can see this is an explicit call to emotion in a way that really triggers it. Now, why has it been run for 15, 20 years? It's because it really freaking works, right? It's really interesting. Okay, so how do people give more? Well, it turns out we're influenced by others. Again, this is sort of how the species evolves, no surprise. Our need to belong drives our behavior. We're motivated to behave similarly to those around us. Now, there's a lot of research here that we're not included in that people's fear of ostracism often outweighs their fear of death, right? But in a prehistoric context, ostracization and death are effectively the same thing because you can't effectively survive in the absence of group coherence. And so this sense of belonging is something that we really crave as humans. We're motivated to behave similar to those around us. In ambiguous circumstances, we turn to those around us for guidance on the right way to behave, right? How often do you think about an event or a party or a work gathering and you sort of sit here and be like, well, what are other people going to wear? Right? And they're all sort of thinking, well, what are other people going to do? I want to fit in, right? It's very rare that you go to a conference and think, I want to dress so differently from everybody else. A Columbia Business School study examined the role that our peers have on charitable giving or pro-social behavior. University students were given information about peer donation rates, high or low, before being asked to donate. To test if social comparisons, knowing what their peers did, influenced their own charitable giving, the study found students were more likely to donate, as you might have guessed, when they believed others were doing the same. Donation rates increased by 5% when students were told the high donation rate compared to those who were told the low donation rate, right? So you saw a big bump there. This supports the concept of conditional cooperation. So what are we doing here? As we think about doing fundraising, we're talking about all the things that everyone else is doing and be a part of it, right? We really want to belong. We want to be a part of a group. We want to be a part of an effort. We don't want to be the standalone person in many cases. Many of you, it is August 5th. Many of you are aware that we are now in the throes of Make a Will Month, which turns out is by far, by an enormous amount, the most successful planned giving campaign ever run and continues to be so every year. And it's really surprising because August doesn't feel like estate planning month. And why is it so useful? It's because this feeling of we're all doing it. And every year, what happens is more and more nonprofits do it. And so not only do you hear from your college, but you might hear from your church or your synagogue or your mosque, right? You might hear from your local land trust. You might hear from your kid's private school. You might hear from the zoo or the museum or the hospital that you got treated at last week. And suddenly this feeling of everyone's doing it makes me want to do it a lot more. And every year you see more estate plans being made and more bequests. And so Make a Will Month is one of the quintessential examples of social proof in action that works really, really well. Robert says this related to the law of social proof, and I'm actually not sure what the law of social proof is, so please let me know. Um, Great questions. Um, these dynamics are at play in match scenarios. Join the match. Marta, we're going to come to that in a second. So keep in your mind here um, that match question as well. Phoebe says, by the way, that we're linking, if you can see at this little bottom, this little hyperlink at the bottom, every study, for those of you that think, wow, this webinar was wildly insufficient, let me go read a 55-page academic paper, you will have access to all of those in here. Okay, so now the word overhead has now culturally been a little bit negative, and it reduces giving. And a 2021 study published in Nonprofit and Volunteer Sector Quarterly by HQ and Daniel Levine sought to test how communicating about overhead influences charitable giving. 1,700 donors were randomly assigned to charities with either 0% or 25% overhead. And even with charities that had the same named impact, meaning they both said, hey, we fed 100 families this year. We let 1,000 people into the museum. Donors chose to give significantly more to the 0% overhead charity. The study also focused on how framing overhead can help lessen donors' aversion. So there's a follow-up test after seeing strong overhead aversion. All participants saw the same cost information, but with different labels. One group saw the term overhead. The other group saw the same spending, but framed in neutral terms. So we don't use that word. Donations were much higher when the word overhead was removed. So for many of you, raising money for overhead or general operating costs is unavoidable. This is totally fine. Those operating costs are very, very important to the organization. They're very, very important to the sector. Please don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But it's still our job to raise more money as opposed to less money. So you may need to raise money for general fund or have costs. If so, thinking about a more educational framing to keep donors focused on your mission. Every dollar you give helps us build a stronger foundation. That means X can do more effectively for years to come. Always tie the ask back to your mission and avoid the term overhead whenever possible. So if you're giving to the general fund and someone says, hey, what's in the general fund? You'd say, well, most of that money, let's say I work at a food bank, most of that money goes right to feeding people. Some of that money goes into conversations like this so we can feed even more people. Other money goes into legal efforts so we can keep the real estate that we have to feed people. Everything is like we do X so that we can do Y. And so often that sort of overhead is treated as just X, as just accounting, when the accounting exists so that we don't get shut down by the government so we can keep feeding people. And so everything has to be a because, right? We spend the overhead because of the impact. This is really, really important, right? And so and what's happened is historically not enough people have explained the overhead, and so there's overhead aversion. So look, if you are something like, Charity Water has done a heck of a job. What they do is they have a bunch of wealthy donors cover the overhead, then everyone else says 100% of your donation goes directly to water access in the developing world. That is a great strategy. If you can do that, great. If you can't, think about really explaining the why behind this, because all of these are strategic decisions that you are making in support of your mission. So let's keep an eye on that as well. Insight 6, matching gifts. Super interesting. Um, Economists Carlin and List in 2007 tested whether offering matching grants would increase charitable donations and whether larger match ratios would make a bigger impact. All donors received a fundraising letter from a real nonprofit. This is a public radio station. Some letters included no match, others offered a 1-to-1, 2-to-1, or 3-to-1 match. The match was real. This is all real. It's not fictitious, funded by a major donor, and applied up to a certain threshold. Then they tracked response rates and donation amounts. Um, Before we tell you what happened, what do you think happened when there was a match? What do you think happened when there's a 2-to-1 match or a 3-to-1 match? So give yourself 20 seconds to make your best guess. All right, we have a lot of different guesses, so we're just going to get right into it. A 1-to-1 match increased the likelihood of giving by 19%. So you basically got 19% more gifts by doing a 1-to-1 match. This also led to higher average donations. Now, we've talked a lot about the sort of supply and demand curves in the past, right? And why reducing tax incentives to give hurts giving. Because I want to have $100 in impact, now it costs me $100. It used to cost me 70 because I would get a tax break. Now what we're saying is for $100, I can get $100 of impact for $50, or I can get $200 of impact for $100. So the supply and demand curve shifts and led to larger average donations. This is the same idea as if I give you a coupon for 20% off your next TV, you're more likely to buy a TV because suddenly you have to spend less to get more. Now, increasing the match to 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 didn't improve results. Now, this is really interesting. Now, of course, it's not that this didn't, certainly if every dollar is getting matched, the value of the match goes up for you. But for donors, the 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, in my sense, starts to feel a little absurd, whereas this 1-to-1 is a lot more believable. So increasing 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 didn't improve results. You might actually rather stretching out that 1-to-1 match. Right? So this is a really big takeaway because a lot of you are thinking about how do we set different match levels. What we're saying here is 1-to-1 match is totally fine. The match itself mattered more than the match size, right? So the fact that this exists. So the first 500 donations might be matched. The first 100 donations might be matched. You can say these things even if that match isn't $1 million match. The presence of a match signals what? That A, I'm going to have more impact for the same cost, and B, other people are doing this. I'm in this together, right? These are what? Lemurs, meerkats? Someone tell me what these are. Ferrets? But these two, right, we're in this together and we'd much rather do this as well. Alicia says they're meerkats. All right, a lot of people believe they're meerkats. Matching appeals worked across new and previous donors, so it's a great way to get folks off the sidelines. Some of you might be thinking right now about your Giving Tuesday plans. Match would be a great way to get some new donors during Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is one of the number one days of donor acquisition in the year, right? So let's start to sort of sock this away. Insight seven. Now, this is super duper interesting. I assume that everything else is interesting to you, but I found this to be particularly interesting. The way we thank donors matters. A 2023 study featured in the American Economic Journal tested whether thank you calls increase future giving. Now, how much do you think, on a percentage basis, how much do you think thank you calls increase future giving? 5%, 0, 10, 20, 40, 100. All right, we've got a ton, 75, 50, 80. Now, they partnered with public TV stations and a national nonprofit. The experiment included 600,000 donors and nearly 500,000 calls over 6 years. So this is a super legit study. Donors were randomly assigned to receive or not receive a thank you call. Right? So this is totally random. This is very good. This is very good experimental design if you were ever thinking about going to academia. Fundraisers predicted, as you are right now, that calls would boost retention by 80%. Right? So that's the prediction. That's what you all think is going to happen. That's what the fundraisers in the study expect to happen. That's what I expected to happen. Right? Now, what actually happened? The study found that thank you calls had no significant effect on donor retention or gift size. Let me say this again. The study found that thank you calls had no significant effect on donor retention or gift size. So this is surprising. And you might think, oh, that's nonsense because it's not what you expected. It's not what I expected either. But this is an extremely valid survey. Retention was around 30% across both groups, call and no call, and the average gifts remained about the same. What does this mean? It means that for the most part, that organization was wasting a lot of money on thank you calls that had no impact. Now, a separate study on thank yous conducted by researchers at Yale's Department of Psychology in the great city of New Haven sought to test the effect of thank you gifts on donation amounts. What do you all think is the effect of a thank you gift on donation amounts? Up 20%, up 50%, up 100%, none, etc. What do you think? We get a lot of zeros, lowers it. Okay, so people are pro thank you calls, but now that we've burned you on thank you calls, you're mad, you think that the gifts don't do anything. So participants were randomly assigned to receive no gifts, a low value gift, or a high value gift. Because what we can't do is just test one thing. Maybe people hate magnets. Maybe people hate calendars. Maybe people hate greeting cards. But they've actually tried a whole bunch of things. The gift they used included pens, coffee mugs, an ugly tie. This is how you got to a low value gift. Tote bags, fan favorite. Chocolate, love our chocolate. It activates the same brain as giving, right? And what happened here? Across all experiments, donors gave more when no gift was offered. High value gift meant the average donation was $18.44. A low value gift actually increased donations over a high value gift. Now that's sort of counterintuitive. No gift increased donations. Now, part of this, especially if you're telling someone you're going to give them a thank you, you're like, I don't really want to spend $50 on a mug that's not even that good looking, right? And so you end up in this dynamic where people start anchoring towards the value of the gift and you're pushing the amount of money you're actually going to get downwards. That's a problem, right? So what are we doing? We're spending a whole bunch of time, right? All our volunteers are like putting the chocolates and the mugs or the ugly ties in these bags and they're shipping them out, et cetera. And all we're doing is depressing donations. So let's use our efforts to better ways. Reframing the gift to benefit others slightly improved donations, but still didn't match the no gift condition, right? So your chance to give a gift elsewhere is a little bit better than a gift to you, but it's still worse than nothing. So that's a really important takeaway here as well. But thanking donors is still a necessary step in your stewardship plan. So how do we square this circle? Um, how do we think about this dynamic of all these things are saying actually like thank you calls don't matter, thank you gifts are actually harmful. In 2017, a national study of 98,000 labs donors who had previously given X The top reason they stopped giving, they said they weren't thanked or acknowledged. The most effective thank you should feel genuine, should never feel transactional, right? So these gifts that feel too transactional, in many ways, the fear is that those calls feel too transactional. Small acts of personalization can go a long way in making your donors feel valued. Here are a couple of ideas to try with major donors or mid-level donors if you're trying to move them into that major donor category. You can share an invite to an upcoming event. There's value in the invite, even if they can't attend, right? So this is an important point. They may not be able to make it, and inviting them is still valuable. Referencing their last gift or their loyal support in the next outreach. A timely thank you text is much more likely to be acknowledged than a phone call, right? So this is all useful. One of the things we said very early in the conversation is that the more you own something, the more valuable it is to you, right? So I have this mug, handmade mug. I did not buy it. I don't know what it costs. I assume it costs something like $25 as a gift. If I saw it in a store, I would not buy it. Now that I own it, if you said, I'll give you $25 for that mug, I would say, no, this is my mug. Don't take it away from me. And so you end up with this dynamic of people aren't willing to give things up, right? The things that they feel ownership over have more important. Now, what do we do with that? It means that our thank you calls should really think about making a donor feel more ownership over the impact they're having and more ownership over your organization. So we'll dive into that a little bit more in a moment. Insight 18, impact data influences how donors give. In 2022, Impact Genome tested whether standardized impact data could influence donor behavior, but this is particularly true when comparing among charities. So participants were shown objective metrics like cost per outcome, number of people served annually. They took part in 8 simulated donation rounds, deciding whether to keep or donate $5 to one of the charities shown each round, right? So they get what happens is some grad students helping out the professor, they hand out $5, right? Maybe in 5 singles. And each time they can put the money in their pocket or they can hand it over to a charity. So we're simulating this. I just went to 3 groups. Group 1 only saw charity descriptions. Group 2 saw descriptions plus impact metrics. Group 3 made an initial donation based on descriptions, then saw the metrics and could add $1 to their gift. When donors saw comparable results data, they were 80% more likely to choose the most impactful charity, right? So data helped them choose more. Now let's go back for a second. What's missing here in this study? So a charity description versus charity description plus impact. Susan nails it. There's no story, right? These are not, in our view, the most impactful ways to do it. But if you're saying, look, if option 1 is, hey, look, we're in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we feed people, right? We feed people who are hungry. Compared to we're in Worcester, Massachusetts, we feed people who are hungry. Last year we helped 87,000 or 8,000 families and a total of 800,000 meals. The second one's obviously much better. That's different than saying, look, let me just tell you about some of the work we did last week about this family that walked in and then telling the whole story. Because that third thing is going to really knock people's socks off a lot more than these impact pieces. So I want to make sure you do it. Insight number 9, dear friend Russell James warns you to choose your words carefully. Our word choice really does matter when it comes to how donors give. A study from our friend, again, Dr. James, shows that conversational, family-oriented language triggers emotions tied to social bonding and generosity. Formal, contract-like terms trigger logical thinking, which can actually deter giving, right? If it feels like doing your taxes, you're probably not going to do it. If it feels like Christmas or Hanukkah or another gift-giving situation, you're much more likely to do it. In one experiment, identical descriptions of charitable remainder trusts, many of you know what these are. These are a more complex form of a planned gift. One included the language, make a transfer of assets. The other simply said, make a gift. Both, by the way, were followed by descriptions of what this is. So it's not just it's not just that people think they're giving a toy. Interest in donating tripled with this simpler make a gift phrasing. Let me show you what this looks like. You see in the blue up here at the top, it says make a transfer of assets, where you get an immediate tax deduction, still control the involvement of assets, et cetera. So there is some complexity here in describing it. The second one says make a gift, where you get an immediate tax deduction. So we're still explaining the thing, right? And the values behind it. You get an immediate tax deduction. You control the investment. And then there's something going to charity after you die. Well, look, it says interested now 27% over 14%. Not now, but in the future, pretty even, and will never be interested, 32 versus 20. So this is a really big gap. What are we seeing here? We're saying that if a charity changes the first few words away from make a transfer to make a gift, they're going to get double the number of people who are interested now, right? What we're trying to do here in these sessions is do things that create no additional work for you that are going to have impact like doubling your take on this type of outreach, right? Very, very, very important. Coming back to Dr. James, similar study on gift annuities. It used the same description, but one formal language, the other more simple. Enter into a contract versus make a gift. Interest quadrupled with this similar language. In every case, removing technical terms increased donor interest significantly, right? Interested now, 29 to 13, right? Never be interested, etc. So you start to see this really different dynamic, right? Will never be interested, 44. A contract, that sounds terrifying. Making a gift, that sounds lovely. What if I tell you sign this contract versus I say, hey, do you want to partner? Right? Do you want to team up on this? Versus do you want to engage in a contractual relationship? Your brain's going to get really scared in that contractual view. If I say, do you want to partner on this? You're going to say, let's team up. That really triggers part of my brain that is pro-social, right? So interesting dynamics. Um, 10, going back to what we said, right? Our criticism of the earlier study that just said description or impact. Singular studies stand out. A 2007 study tested how emotional stories versus stats influence charitable giving. This is very, very important. Participants were asked to donate after reading about either a single named child suffering from starvation. This is an emotional appeal, or statistics about starvation affecting millions of children. This is a data-driven appeal. And you'd be surprised. Also, we tested stories and stats. This is really important. Donations were highest when only the story of an individual child was shared. Adding stats to the story reduced donations even below the emotional story alone. Let me just say this again. Adding stats to the story reduced donations even below the emotional story alone. This is commonly referred to as the identifiable victim effect, right? And victim is obviously one option here, but it doesn't have to be a negative story. It can talk about one story of improving a child's life. It can be one story of a family having an amazing time at the museum, right? It can be one story of an animal that you rescued. Now, look, I'm not worried about you writing the stats only email. I think most of you are more advanced than that. But boy, you can feel internally, not just in you, but I mean inside your organization, there's a lot of gravitational pull towards the stories and stats, right? Your ED says, yeah, I know, but like we're super proud of these stats. Maybe we should include them, right? And you sort of end up with the compromise of story and stats. And so I'm just sharing. You have these resources in the deck. Next time you have that conversation, at least really try to think about just front loading the story, just centering the story. And now, why would this be? Why do stats about hunger make someone less likely to give versus one story? You know, look, this isn't proven in the science, but my best guess is that when I hear about one kid, I think I can probably help that. I can probably do that, right? When I hear about world hunger, I think I'm but one man. Like, what can I do? And so you have this dynamic where the path to success has to feel achievable. The path to impact has to feel achievable. Otherwise, I actually don't believe that my money's going to have an impact because the things feel so overwhelming. Our little bonus insight, one of my all-time favorite studies coming out of Harvard. This is in the 1970s. This is an experiment run at a busy library copy machine, which also features very prominently when we talk about effective writing. So, my guess is there are some of you who are young enough that you have never seen a copy machine, but like there was a period where they were useful, and there was a period before that where they were like the most important machine in the school. So in the 1970s, there aren't really computers, there's just copy machines, and everyone's making copies for every reason. So there's a line of the copy machine, right? Again, sort of put yourself in the 1970s. We're playing that, we're playing the British invasion music in the background, right? And there's a line of the copy machine. And so again, we're like all these experiments are just like sending grad students to do crazy stuff. So a grad student gets sent in, right? A teaching assistant gets sent in. he would approach someone or she would approach someone waiting in line and ask to cut in. And then they said, and they're just sort of marking down, do I get let in or not? Right? Tested three versions. First version, hey, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine? Right? Again, Xerox is a brand of copier. Most of you know this, but some of you might be too young for that. May I use the Xerox machine? 60% compliance, which means, hey, this is a pretty friendly school, right? People are willing to cut you. And they're cutting the line though, right? Social taboo. There's a fake reason. Let's go the real reason, right? So the real reason is, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush? And 19 out of 20 people said yes, right? Because I'm in a rush. But this fake reason above is super interesting because I have to make copies. Now, of course, you have to make copies. That's why you're going to the Xerox machine, right? That's the only thing you could do in a Xerox machine. There's nothing, they're not even sending faxes yet, right? This is all you can do. And yet, any reason at all compared to the first one, where there's no reason, creates almost the same impact as a super valid reason. I'm in a rush, right? I'm in a rush. I've got to get to class. I'm waiting for class, whatever it may be. And so all this is to say, like, do not ever ask for something without giving a reason, even if you think your reason sort of stinks, right? Give it a shot. Make that push. It's really wild. Um, so anyway, now you know what Xerox machines are if you were there, or you recognize this value of, look, if I say, look, at the end of the session, we're going to give you a survey. It's extremely helpful to us. In actuality, right? We go through all the feedback. We make sure that we can give away the books. We make sure you're signed up for next week if you are. We also read everything and say, oh, that section wasn't clear. Let's go fix it for next time, right? So that's all the reason. But if I said, please fill out the survey because we need survey responses, that doesn't make any sense at all. And yet it would still get a lot more survey respondents than if I just said, please fill out the survey, right? So you can say because, but basically the implication here is that you need to give a reason, and it's okay if your reason is pretty mediocre. All right, let's talk about some practical tips to apply donor psychology in your day-to-day now that we have a bunch of interesting things, but not sure what to do with them. First, here's one of my very favorite things in thank yous and stewardships, right? We are recreating the warm glow, and we are also creating more ownership for the donor, right? We're not giving them a sort of crappy mug or a calendar or a pen, whatever. And so this is the lapsed donor stewardship strategy. Dear Michael, I was going through our records. I saw you made a really meaningful gift to our museum in August of 2011, August 5th to be exact. As a side note, this signals that you know more about the situation than he does. And so he's very open to listening because there's a thing about him, right? Some of you remember the sort of, you probably still, some of you still use Facebook, that Facebook on this day, right? On this day 4 years ago, and how meaningful that was to sort of time travel back. That was certainly a different time. Barack Obama was still in his first term. Adele had just released her first album, and the world barely ever used video chat, right? We're putting them back in that world. So they're re-inhabiting the time where they felt most interested in giving. I'd be curious to better understand what motivated that gift, and I'd love to share how those resources have been put to use over the years. Would you mind if I gave you a call this week? So what are we doing here? We're telling Michael about how his money had impact, right? How he made the impact, how he has ownership over the impact that happened. We're also trying to understand him better. We're asking questions. And this ends up being extremely, extremely useful. Here's example language as we note. Tip 2, keep it positive. Donors are more likely to give when they feel hope, empathy, or inspiration. Avoid guilt-driven messaging and appeal since negative feelings can actually deter giving and also make it less likely that they're going to read the next thing you send them. Use warm, affirming language whenever possible to make the donor feel part of the solution. Remember this owner, like if you read a message, does the donor have ownership over the solution or not? You're part of a community that believes in a better future. You can be the reason a student stays in school, right? Not we're the reason, just help us because we are so great. You are the reason, right? The more that the nonprofit is a conduit for impact as opposed to the impact that is totally separate from the donor, the better off you will be. Thank you for being someone who shows up when it matters most, right? You don't want to be like, I'm not that person. I'm not someone who shows up when it matters most. Tip 3, find moments of spontaneous thank yous that feel deeply non-transactional. Research shows that generic thank you calls do not increase giving. What does work? Thank yous that feel personal, specific, and unexpected. I love this unexpected component. Whenever possible, tie your thanks to impact, not to mugs, not to ugly neckties. Thanks to your support, you protected 10 more acres of wetland. Just wanted you to know. right? Think about think about the ownership. Holy cow. Like if you get a text like that, hey, thanks to you, we just protected 10 more acres of wetland. Just want to know you're having a great day. Doesn't matter if you burned dinner. Doesn't matter if your boss yelled at you. You had a day where you protected 10 acres of wetland, and that's a great day, and that's a feeling that you want to replicate. Elizabeth says we call it surprise and delight. Also, Elizabeth, great to see you. Um, Surprise and delight, right? Having this idea of something unexpected feels especially good, right? If you shoot a this sort of going back to this thinking of you, think about sending a text to a friend today that says, "Hey, I was just thinking about you," and something nice. It's going to make their day, right? It doesn't even have to be a close friend. It's really, really valuable. Some other ideas to try. A quick photo and message update. I really like this, right? Those of you that has some visual, right? And without, privacy implications, right? I wouldn't do this at a children's hospital. I would do this at a land trust or a zoo or a museum. Hey, like we're about to open, and we're only able to welcome the 1,000 people that are going to come today because of you. Just thought you'd like to see it, right? That's the sort of visual cues that will create some surprise and delight. A handwritten note celebrating their giving anniversary. Hey, last year you gave, right? Just want to say thank you again. Here's what it's been doing, right? Here's how we put it to work. A short just because thank you text, and of course the thinking of you. Tip four, flag quick wins to demonstrate impact. So impact stats establish credibility and trust with donors, but you only want to deploy them strategically. Avoid pairing metrics with emotional stories we talked about. This reduces giving. Instead, use data in separate messages or follow-up appeals. Try sending a thank you email a week later, like, thanks to you, we served 50 families last week. Or add a metric to the subject line. Just $1 provides clean water. Just $1 provides clean water for 2 days, right? This is interesting because the more that the impact is specific and narrow, the more effective it is. It might be more impressive to you to say, hey, we served 2,500 families last year. But if you can tell me about what happened today, my little brain can wrap its head around that, right? Wrap itself around that and not get totally overwhelmed by the problem. So the more specific, right? In the last hour, we just did this, and that was thanks to you. That creates a very specific dynamic. Tip five, reframe overhead. Many donors want their gift to have a direct impact on the mission, not to go to cover admin costs. When donors are told overhead has already been covered, more people will give, gift size increases. Consider leveraging major donors to unlock greater giving from your mid and small donors. Ask one of your major donors if they can consider putting their gift towards essential ops so you can tell your small donors something like, generous donors already covered our admin costs, which means every dollar you give goes directly to supporting mission. Now, of course, going back to this, the alternative is actually getting specific. Every dollar we spend on this is to allow us to have the impact, right? Every time we hire a lawyer, it's for this, right? Every time we build a building that our staff can work in, and so we can do more of this, right? It has to have that because element in the overhead, where now we're combining some of the topics, but we need to be able to explain that why. Remind donors why they're one of many with social proof, right? People are more likely to act when they know others like them are doing the same. Use language like you're joining thousands of supporters or you're part of a growing movement. Social proof is especially powerful for planned giving. Why is it more powerful for planned giving than annual giving or other types of giving? It is because the less likely something is to be talked about, the more social proof matters because I don't have social cues. I know that sometimes my friends run 5Ks and everyone chips in $30 or whatever. I don't know which of my friends have made planned gifts. And so when you can tell me, actually, a lot of our donors do this, that's news to me and it has greater impact than telling me a lot of people donate $5 because I know when I talk to my friends about their $5 donations. So this is a particularly interesting dynamic. It makes estate planning feel less about the person and more about the act of creating a will and more of the thing that we're all doing together and less personally tied to my own mortality. This is why Make a Will Month, which so many of you are participating in, is so, so important. And thank you for doing it. Taking advantage of the next big thing here, right? Presumably your Make a Will Month plans are already baked. Take advantage of a National Estate Planning Awareness Week, which is October 20th to 26th this week. Highlight that others are updating their wills or making legacy gifts. This was officially named by Congress, by the way. Try language like this October. Hundreds of supporters are including a gift in their will, and you can too. Or join the growing number of blank supporters planning their legacy this October during National Estate Planning Awareness Week, which you can, if you're on the inside, you can refer to as NEPA for like the cool kids. Tip seven, use words that work right? Research from our friend Dr. James shows that word choice can dramatically increase um, plan giving. Always opt for family language when speaking with donors and avoid technical jargon. By the way, this will be easier for you as a fundraiser to say, hey, do you want to make this gift that helps pay you back? Than trying to get all the words right about charitable gift annuities. And you'll feel sort of embarrassed if you stumble over them. So it's easier for everybody. Focus on words that are simple and social. A good rule of thumb that Dr. James shares is, would I use this phrase in a casual convo with my grandmother? And if not, change it. Formal terms lower charitable interest. When asked to consider making a gift to charity in my will, social language, 23% were interested, 12% said never. In comparison, if I said, do you want to make a bequest gift to charity? This is more technical. 12% are interested, 14% say never, right? So we're doubling our impact just by using words that are not that fancy. Again, same amount of work, much better impact. Tip 8, think of how your mission impacts the life of one person and tell that story. Share the story so that it's clear to the listener or reader what the result of their donation will be in a way they can picture it. Keep the narrative simple. One person or one family or one animal or one plot of land, right? One transformation. Even better if you have approval to highlight a real person your organization has helped. But if not, sort of talk about the story without naming the person. Now, some of you might not be doing things like international development. Maybe you're doing cancer research. Talk about the story of one doctor that's able to break through X and do important work because of the work you're doing, right? Really stick with the story. If your mission isn't as straightforward, put yourself in the position of a donor. Ask yourself, what impact does our org have on one person, one community, one species? Meet Sarah. Her life was forever changed because of your support. This is Bella, a once homeless dog, now in a loving home because of your contributions. Your gift gave hope to one family, and their story begins with you. Tip 9, always provide a reason to give. When crafting an appeal, include a reason for the donor to support your mission. Adding a reason to give can almost double your success rate. Remember, because it's a powerful word that drives behavior. And if you ever find yourself in a rush near a copy machine, you can just use this clever trick, and 93% of people will let you cut them. When we think about providing a reason to give, you can see here, oops, we recently shared Drea's story with Wyman. Drea was introduced to the Wyman through the Teen Outreach Program when she was in sixth grade. She enjoyed it so much. She applied for and was accepted into the Wyman Leaders Program. Throughout her experiences, she built meaningful relationships with her coaches, developed strong communication, leadership skills, etc. She's now pursuing a master's degree at Southeast Missouri State in higher ed while serving in a grad assistant position as hall director. In the spirit of ensuring our entire community, including young people like Drea, can thrive, I'm reminding you to create your FreeWill legacy, etc., etc., etc. Right? Though a gift in your will by naming through a gift in your will by naming us as a beneficiary of nonprofit assets, you build a legacy that connects teens and Drea to their voices, their strengths, their futures for years to come. You can see that there's a reason on why we're doing this, right? There's a reason I want to make a will. There's a benefit to you and a benefit to someone else, and a very clear story about one specific person, right? That really nails this. Wyman does amazing things and could tell you all about them and could tell you these incredibly impressive statistics, and they're actively restraining themselves in a way that's going to generate just enormously more giving. So big shout out to Christine Ratterman and the whole team at Wyman for doing that as well. Okay, a couple of resources. One, we are dropping in the chat right now. Thank you, Phoebe. Phoebe, thank you for all of your incredible effort and research. Phoebe was really, I mean, both of us were, but Phoebe was really climbing through some of these very difficult to read academic papers to pull out the core learnings for y'all. And so feel free to give her a shout out in the chat. But also, please fill out that survey so that A, we can give you the book, and B, we can get your feedback. It is very short, very easy, and hugely helpful to us. Make another survey, et cetera, et cetera. On Thursday, August 12th, Thursday, August 7th at 12 p.m., we will be doing a walkthrough of Grant Assistant, which a lot of people have been asking about. Grant Assistant is an unbelievably cool AI tool that uses AI to help you find best fit grants, right? So of all of the funding opportunities, there are more than 20,000 in the tool. It is adding 1,000 a week, right? Rapidly becoming the most exhaustive grant resource on the planet. This, by the way, some of you will ask, does it work in Canada? Does it work in Australia? Yes, it does. And then we'll help you draft those grant opportunities with everything that it knows about you, everything it knows about the funder, everything it knows about the sort of broader context. And so it's very, very impressive. Come check it out. You are very welcome to join. Next webinar, 2 weeks from now. So you got a week off to have a quiet Tuesday afternoon next week without you. Now, in 2 weeks, we are going to be debuting some key learnings from the 2025 Planned Giving Report. So we do a ton of research. As you might know, FreeWill is the largest repository of estate plans in the world. And so we pull the research on charitable giving based on actual behavior by actual donors and hundreds of thousands of them. So come join us in 2 weeks for a sneak peek at some of the very, very cool learnings from that. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to take our survey. That will be so valuable to us. And with that, we have almost out of time. So we will see you August. We will see you on Thursday. We'll see most of you on Thursday. I know a lot of folks are joining for the grant assistant component. We will see many of you on August 19th, where we will use campfire acoustic in the mode of James Taylor to welcome everybody. And until then, have a wonderful August. Enjoy Make-A-Will month, as I'm sure you all are, but also enjoy your summer with your families and your friends. If there's anything I can do to help at all, shoot me a note, patrick@freewill.com. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, and that is that. So enjoy the rest of your week. Talk to you all soon. Look forward to seeing many of you in person. We are doing a bunch of events in September. So speaking at South Sound, Plan Giving, or AFP maybe, in out in the Washington State area, going to Baltimore for a conference. So I hope to encounter many of you there. Have a wonderful August and talk to you all soon.